children had a party. It's party time. It was Orville's coming out party. Well, they were so much fun. And they laughed and laughed and laughed. That is, until Orville's friends dropped in. Children should play with dead things.
The children had a party. And children shouldn't play with dead things. Alright, right off the bat, that's one of the best titles. I think that's one of the best titles of any movie. Not just a horror film, but I just love it. Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things from 1972. And this is Will, and we're going to be talking about dead things and children playing with them. Okay, right off the bat, this is one of my favorites from childhood. Still remains and is one of my favorites, but it's such a fond memory from childhood. My whole family, my whole horror-obsessed family would watch. And of course, back then, in the 1970s, a lifetime ago, you couldn't time shift today, right? With our DVRs and our on-demand, you had to watch when they put it on broadcast. And in the New York, New Jersey area, it was on, I think, Channel 9, WWOR, PIX, and Channel 5. And those were the, it could have been on ABC too, CF7 or whatever. But 5, 9, 11, those are the channels for the quirky and weird. Just the horror movies or comedies or mysteries, or just, the off-kilter, the non-mainstream in a way. And they kind of maybe had to work a little harder because they were, affiliates and syndicated stuff. And that's where I remember opening the TV guide, like in the beginning of the week, and searching the listings. Oh, children shouldn't play with dead things. It's on 11:30, 12. They used to put it on after midnight, I think. It used to be on like 12 o'clock or so, or later. And again, just from the title alone, I remember before I watched it, probably for the first time, I was like, what does that mean? Is it a comedy, or is it, is it supposed to? And it is a comedy as well. It's certainly, it's defined actually in the official wiki as a comedic horror film. And I'd agree, but the really nightmarish and scary and downright horrific parts are that as well. So you've got a real balance. I guess something like Return of the Living Dead 2 qualifies. It's very, funny and cool, but it's also really scary. And I would submit, I did the podcast on Night of the Animated Dead, the classic George Romero, Night of the Living Dead, the classic modern zombie movie that really started it all. That Walking Dead, all these modern zombie landscapes and franchises owe a huge debt, of course, the entire debt to George Romero. But if you look at Night of the Living Dead, I still think that's the scariest dead thing, zombie movie, corpse, whatever, reanimated corpse movie. After that, Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things. It's almost neck and neck. Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things at times is just spine tingling. It is skin crawling and creepy beyond measure. And, Taste of Tea, you just have to watch. I can keep going on and on about how, terrifically horrific it is, but you've got to watch. Now, before you watch, let's have a little background. Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things, also known as Revenge of the Living Dead, or Things from the Dead, and Shrieks. Instead of Freaks, Shrieks. I never heard that one. It's a 1972 comedic horror film directed by Bob Clark. It's become a cult classic. It's a low-budget zombie film. It's the third film from director Clark, who became famous for directing another great horror classic, Black Christmas, then A Christmas Story, and Porky's. The film was shot in 14 days on a budget of $50,000. Clark employed some of his college friends to be participants, and they did a great job. Starring Alan Ormsby, who did the makeup. He plays Alan, the weird, sort of demented and sarcastic leader. And he did the makeup as well, and he co-wrote it. So really talented guy. The rest: Jane Daly, Paul Cronin, Jeff Gillen, and I believe Alan Ormsby's sister, Anya Ormsby, and she was also in it. So that's a bit of a rundown, a bit of a backgrounder for it. So if you guys have seen, and who hasn't, A Christmas Story, you know Bob Clark, the director, his work. And A Christmas Story is now right up there with A Christmas Carol, It's a Wonderful Life as the traditional must see. Like, you've got to see A Christmas Story or A Christmas Carol or It's a Wonderful Life. You've got to see really all three, traditional, obligatory Christmas holiday films. So if you've seen it, I'm sure you have, you realize how talented Bob Clark is. And then Black Christmas, another favorite of mine, which I know I'll be doing a podcast on later. That's also Bob Clark's work. And Black Christmas is probably, again, one of the scariest films. And this is not any sort of rumor, but it's pretty much official. John Carpenter got a lot of ideas, or certainly talked to Bob Clark after Black Christmas, and that kind of led to the development, evolution, and production of Halloween. So he sort of took, you know, ideas, whatever inspiration, and if you look at the both films, if you're fans of both, you'll understand what I'm talking about. And one of the great things about it, and certainly it's something that's really rarely used today, the plot device and the reason that the dead come back. Ever since Night of the Living Dead, it's been radiation or mutagenic viruses or some science fiction, sci-fi, horror, plot device and reason. With Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things, it's a grand grimoire, a spell book that the character Alan uses. And, people could say, well, that's kind of hokey, it's kind of old school. But certainly, one of the things, as when you watch the film, the dead are not just hungry maybe for flesh. They're not just flesh eaters. There's a sense really of sort of revenge and of sort of, the spell going out of control. So whereas, a virus, spawn dead or radiation, the dead shamble about and they want to eat you. But there's no, sort of revenge there. There's no emotion. There's no sort of, I'm going to get you. But with Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things and other magic sort of, created zombies, there's that emotion more, or that, sense of or potential for more emotion, for more revenge, and you can see the zombies in Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things as really being angry and weirded out, whereas most other, they're just sort of shambling and they're vacant and they don't have much going on upstairs. And I guess that's why when you shoot the brain, that's about it. Now, some notes in terms of critics. Books written in his book Zombie Mania, 80 Movies to Die For, author Arnold T. Blumberg observes that the end is pretty creepy, where it's sort of silent over the strangely surreal shots of zombies preparing the sailboat for launching. The film conjures an atmosphere of hopelessness, but then again, Ormsby manages that before the first dead body clawed its way out of the ground. And it's a really good description. There's something really about Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things and a lot of zombie or horror movies where it's very hopeless, it's doom, and these people are not going to get out of it, and they're not going to prevail. I mean, they could prevail, it's possible, but there's sort of this dread that, this is tragedy, my friends. The Encyclopedia of Horror concludes that given the budget and the number of personnel involved, the special effects by Alan Ormsby are surprisingly effective. And that's another great observation, as I will note to you. The makeup in Children is just extraordinary for the budget and for what, they were trying to achieve. I think it's some of the best. And again, keep in mind, they had a budget of about $50,000. So whereas many other, more modern or expensive zombie films might have just as sophisticated, Walking Dead has extraordinary makeup and effects, of course. Their budget per episode is probably, quadruple or 10 times what Bob Clark had back in the day. And lastly, but not least, for sure, is the music. Composer Carl Zitra, who did the really nightmarish, haunting music for Black Christmas, Bob Clark's, other horror masterpiece. I believe he did A Christmas Story and Porky. So Bob Clark called upon Carl Zitra for many of his productions, and the music is just so great. Again, horror films, like any film, do depend and rely on a good soundtrack and music, but horror especially, because you've got these visuals, you have these high octane emotions, but then that music that's sort of pumping along and driving the narrative, driving the horror and the dread and the spectacle. And again, I think out of any horror movie, Black Christmas by Carl Zitra as well is some of the most incredibly nightmarish and haunting. It's awesome. And sadly, one of the last notations in the wiki here, director Bob Clark planned a remake before his death in 2007. In 2010, Gravesend Film Enterprises confirmed they were producing the remake. It was set to begin filming in 2011, but it never came to pass. So that was it was really sad. Bob Clark's premature death, and we're left with wondering, will we ever see a remake? And again, what will be great is to have that mythology and magic or spell or more horror supernatural instead of the sci-fi. I love the sci-fi as well, but it's nice to go back to sort of old school where there's a grimoire, a spell book. Well, all I can say is you guys got to watch. If you've never seen Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things, you've got to take a chance. It's excellent, and I'm sure you will be satisfied. Hope you enjoy listening, and hope you keep on subscribing. If not, we're free, or you can pay the pay people, the $4.99 for exclusives, exclusive spine tinglers for a paid tier. If not, free, and we welcome your comments. We always like to hear what you're thinking. Go watch Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things. Yes, it's a killer, a real killer.